welcome to Roots and Realities, where we talk about motherhood, marketing, and everything in between. I'm your host, Emma Hushka, founder of Fiddle Leaf Marketing and mom of two little girls navigating the beautiful chaos of growing a business while growing a family. This podcast is all about real stories from real women, the kind of conversations that happen when the to-do list is long, the coffee is cold, and the wins, big or small, are worth celebrating. Whether you're building a brand, packing school lunches, or just trying to find a little space to breathe, you are in the right place. This is Roots and Realities. Let's get into it. Today on Roots and Realities, I'm joined by my friend, Lauren Boss, author of All the Girls I Was Before. Lauren and I actually go way back. We both went to Purdue and first met while studying abroad in Sydney, Australia. So it feels so special to have her here today. In her book, Lauren takes readers on an intimate journey through the many seasons of womanhood, career highs and setbacks, the joys and challenges of motherhood, and the deep work of healing, shifting mindset, and redefining success on your own terms. After years of climbing the corporate ladder, she faced burnout and the unraveling of an identity that once defined her. What followed was a reckoning and a choice to stop living by others' expectations and start defining success for herself. Lauren is now a mom, a small business owner, and a proud member of the Miami Nation of Indians of Indiana. With humor, vulnerability, and reflection, she invites women to trust themselves, embrace change, and create lives they truly love. Lauren, I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to Roots and Realities.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's so good to be here. It's so great to reconnect now so much later in our lives in motherhood and as business professionals and just following our dreams and passions and just getting to be back together is so fun. And I'm so excited to talk to you and your community.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, I have the book right here. I was
Yay.
so excited, when you released it. We've obviously been talking just, as you've been promoting it, and I'm hoping to finish this weekend. Do you know how it is with little ones? It's like anytime I sit down, it's like, mommy, mommy. But I definitely want to talk through a couple like earmark pages I have of some of my highlights. But I'd love to hear, again, we in my intro I talked about like all these different identities, and obviously a lot of what your book is about. But if someone asked you today, like, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I have been through a lot of different identities, and we can get into more of that conversation. And it's definitely a big theme throughout the book, how we shift as women throughout our lives. But for today, I would say I'm a mother, a wife, an author, business owner, and a woman of faith. Those are really the things that are top of mind for me today, but it changes all the time. So, yeah, excited to talk to you more about all those shifts.
I love that. And I love that you said today because I can totally relate to that. Like some days I'm like, I am this, or, other days I'm like, I don't want to be that today. So it's just so cool to hear again, to read in the book, but also hear you talk about like, and that's okay to like, you don't have to always be, who you were last week or even, a few months ago and kind of releasing those expectations that maybe you put on yourself or others put on you. Your
Totally.
book shares again a lot of versions of yourself. Which one feels to like closest to who you are, like in this moment today?
Yeah, in this moment today, well, I talk about in the book a lot of the other versions, having been a stay-at-home mom, having been the breadwinner and the corporate ladder climber, people pleaser, and then learning to take care of myself, just all these different phases. Now I'm less about, the titles or what am I boxed into and more about like how I'm showing up in the world. So for me now, it's about showing up energetically, showing up lovingly and joyfully in the world, and how can I take care of myself to show up for my children and show up for my business. And so it's more about how I show up in the world today. So for me today, the priority is to show up, really joyfully and, not go through my life fearfully and instead go with faith and try new things and be open and joyful in the way I live my life. So that's what's really important to me right now is how I define myself and how I live my life.
I love that. I love that. And I can only imagine the release, and I'm still working through like that removal of titles. It's wild, like, when you chase that corporate ladder, how, and I know you talked about in the book, like it's that next thing, it's that next thing. And it just kind of feels like and I've said it like a hamster wheel. And that's a common, comparison. It just feels like you're chasing something that really doesn't exist because obviously there's, kind of that expectation and lack of fulfillment that you actually need in your life. And I can only imagine the like release of that pressure of these titles that you think you need. So in again, I think you talk about this in the book, but like, was there a certain time throughout any of your identities, but maybe that corporate ladder that you um and maybe it's not one moment, but can you think of any moments that it was like, I'm done with I'm done with this. Like, I'm done putting this pressure on myself and this expectation, and you kind of remember like a moment where you just released that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the corporate world, and I was with one company for 10 years, I did 5 years of sales and 5 years of marketing. And I was a high performer and I was, getting the next award, getting the next promotion. And that was sort of what was dangled in front of you to keep going. And I remember I did get one big promotion and it was kind of like a jumping up and down moment. And it was like a moment. And then as I actually got into the new role, I was like, I don't even necessarily like parts of this. There were just different things that it was like more bureaucracy and less time freedom and less like relationships with the customers, what I had moved into at that point. And I was like, did I really even think this through of like what path I'm taking next? Or did I just think, hey, here's the next big title and here's a little bit more money. So that's what I should do. Like I just hadn't been super intentional at that point about why I wanted to do the next thing. And I think, like you mentioned, the hamster wheel, like we can get on this road or, in these cycles of moving forward just to move forward. And we maybe don't even know if that was where we wanted to go in the first place.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah, I think just like releasing that and releasing the need to have a specific title and thinking more about like, what do you want to experience and what do you want to bring or what next expertise do you want to learn? And that's what I would coach younger women on too, is like, instead of, hey, I want to be a marketing director or whatever the title is. Instead, like, do you want to learn how to lead people? Do you want to get the experience of growing a business? Think more of the experience or what you're going to be doing instead of just the name of the role.
I absolutely love that, and very similar to my experience where it's like, well, this is just the next step. This is just the next step. And like you said, typically then comes with a compensation that it's like, okay, this is, it feels like literally the ladder, and hence, obviously why it's referred to as that. But do I actually enjoy what this is and what this,
Yeah.
like it just kind of happens. And then you're like, wait a second. And I love that you said, that it's more about what are you passionate about? Like, what do you want to spend your days doing rather than like, I achieved this title? And I can only imagine how many people would listen to this and hear, and feel the same way of like, yeah, it was more about what I thought this title meant and how it would make me feel versus
Yeah.
understanding what that day to day would be, and maybe regretting. And at that point in your career, though, if you've climbed, then it usually takes some time. You said you were with that company for 10 years. Some people might just keep going because it's scary to pivot or
Yeah.
maybe start over. And you actually started to say this, and what I wanted to ask you too, and I'm sure this is a tough one to narrow down, at least it is for me, but if you could go back and give your younger self, or just like you said, people earlier in their careers or in life, one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah. One piece of advice. Wow, there's so many, but I'll try to narrow it down. I would say try to focus more on listening to yourself and what you value and what you need and want in your career, in your life, whatever it may be, and less on the outside forces, society, other people within the company. Even if they're saying that's the next thing to do, like, does that really resonate with me? Is that really aligned with my values and what I want to do next? And I think just learning to trust your own voice, that was something that didn't always come naturally for me as a young woman. And sometimes it was like, oh, this leader or this person said this, or society influences me to do this, so that must be the right answer. Instead, looking a little more inward and being able to trust yourself and trust your own voice is the advice I would give to my younger self.
Absolutely. So beautifully said. And, something I could completely agree on, and something I'm still again working to do. It's so hard when I feel like even at a young age, it's the approval of others and, what these expectations and other things. Again, from childhood, it feels like, and to like reprogram that as a young woman, as a woman, and no matter what age is I've really enjoyed the journey. It's been like very empowering to release that, but it's also just wild how much, it feels like those habits, I find myself of like it's a habit, and something I think ingrained at such a young age. And I'm curious, I want to get into more about motherhood and, something I've tried especially with my girls is to kind of catch myself in those, and I remember reading a post years ago, and I actually would bring this up in my leadership of instead of saying, I'm so proud of you, saying you should be proud of yourself, to
Oh, I
kind of
love that.
reverse engineer this like because when people you hear I'm proud of you, you then, associate the accomplishment of like, I want to say how I feel about it rather than, kind of getting them to feel that. And I, use that a lot in leadership. And I've been doing it with the girls. Obviously, they're both really little, but kind of, again, this awareness of what I used a lot of my motivation was good job, you did great, and then it's like, oh, I want more of that, and how that feels when
Yeah.
you hear praise and external praise. And I think I've heard this on like a Mel Robbins podcast and had me kind of, more aware and conscious of this. But when it comes to parenting, how are you, if you are
Mhm.
with your boys, maybe thinking about some of these things that you have now, been working to reprogram yourself, have you kind of taken any of that to parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you talk about with your daughters, like really being conscious of it, right? Because it's easy to just keep those old tendencies going and instead kind of flipping it like, how do you feel? Are you proud of it? And I ask my sons that too. Like when they tell me, my oldest is in kindergarten, he'll tell me things that happened at school instead of me like putting my view on them or like just whatever the situation is. I ask like, how do you feel about that? Like, how does that make you feel? Like, what do you think about that? And maybe he'll say, someone did something and made me feel sad or this and I was proud or happy. So just trying to kind of flip it to like, how does that make you feel? Or, when they tell me something instead of being like, just the good job or this is
Mm-hmm.
my opinion on it. Like just even at a young age, letting them have that and let them reflect on what it means to them. And I just think I try to bring that into my parenting is like just being conscious about how they feel valued and how they feel seen and their voices heard and just what they're experiencing too, right? So I'm trying to remember the name of the author, but there's a book. I think it's called like The Conscious Parent or Conscious Parenting that I read a few years back that I really liked. That it was some of those ideas too. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, raising young girls, I'm glad that you're empowering them and giving them those kinds of things where they can feel proud of themselves. And yeah, same. I do the same thing with my boys, and yeah, I think that's important. And I think this generation of parents maybe do more of that. I don't know if it was talked about or if it was style of parenting before, but yeah, definitely growing up, it was like get the next trophy, get the A, get the
Mm-hmm.
honor society, and then it's like get this, just it's almost like the same thing as the ladder. It's like it's like an external validation of your worth instead of the internal pride that you should feel. But yeah, so
Absolutely.
we're all working through that, I think, still.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just said that you nailed it. And what I've really realized again more with myself and what I'm trying to, kind of change of then how I raise my girls is exactly that where it's and I think, we almost have with social media, really, I think we have so many more like resources and connect community around, these things that maybe are so like innate human behaviors that now it's like, oh, here's another approach to that. And I've thought about like I think, my mom did a tremendous job. My parents did an amazing job raising me. But some of these things that I think were probably just not talked about because they didn't have communities and settings
Yeah.
and blogs and, ways for this to all be talked about are like, oh, maybe try this, and it's cool to have all these resources, it can go both directions,
Yeah.
but to be able to explore that. And like you said, I think I keep coming to this Mel Robbins podcast I remember listening to, and for me it was like light bulb of she said, it's basically, and talking to, if you resonate with this, is that you feel success or your worthiness in your accomplishments. And I was like, oh, my, does that hit? And I remember I was like
Yes.
sobbing because I felt so seen, and it was like, I'm not the only one that feels this way. And I never put like words to, that in those feelings, like you said, from a very young age of like, I am worthy because I achieve these things. And it's like, that's not why I'm worthy. And like being able
Right.
to realize that like within the last year is wild. But then that like how I've changed what fills me up and the things that I do and the way I spend my days, I'm still reminding myself of those things, at 34. And just
Yeah,
like you said, trying to make sure I'm programming as much as I can my girls to kind of realize like you're worthy because of who you are and not because of what you do.
absolutely. And I think, as we shift our mindsets and we shift things in our lives, like you start to kind of realize these things and you look back on like your younger self. And I feel like you have to have grace and like understanding that like you just didn't know and you didn't have that foundation of knowing that, you should feel that your worth is just in being you and it's not in anything external. And I don't know if that's more women than men. I'm not sure. I haven't asked men that question,
Mm-hmm.
but I think for women, it's definitely true. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely like, yeah, you're just expected to be achieving or showing up for your family, whatever it may be. And actually, when I went to stay at home motherhood from being in the corporate world, I found myself doing the same thing. Like, I was trying to be the best mom. Like, now I'm like, okay, now I was showing up really big in the workforce. Now I need to show up really big. I need to
Mm-hmm.
do the flashcards and home cooked meals and have the house clean and
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And then it kind of just got to a point where it was like, okay, that's not the thing. Like, yes, you need to show up for your family, but you need to take care of yourself. Like, what I wasn't facing was myself and my needs. Instead, it
Mm-hmm.
was still trying to make it external of like, okay, I'm going to be valuable by doing these things
Mm-hmm.
instead of just flipping it the other way.
Absolutely. And when you're a high achieving, woman, like you said, this pretty much your whole life and then becoming a mom, what else are you going to do then to be the highest achiever at that, and I
Yeah,
can definitely relate and it's wild how you can kind of see those patterns and trends in every aspect of your life and be like, "Wait a second. Like this isn't actually what this is about." Like you said, yes, showing up, but I don't have to be I mean, you can't be, right? Like it's
right.
unrealistic. And the most important thing, like you said, which so many moms and women forget about is like none of that can happen. You can't even show up unless you're taking care of yourself. And I know so many people can relate to that. And I also wanted to say too, I know especially having, I think your third boy on
Yes.
the way, that, I think it's even, and like you said, there's, I think stigmas around genders and what kind of innately comes out with that. But, I feel like some of the research and things that I've listened to talks about how so many more men are not raised to be comfortable showing emotion or even admitting that they have certain emotions. So I think it's incredible that what you talked about of
Yeah.
asking, your kindergartner of, how did that make you feel? Because from so early, you're teaching him like, think about how you feel and creating a safe space to talk about that. Because again, I think a lot of what I've understood is that so many men are not, have not been raised to speak about their emotions. And I can't imagine, like as a woman, like that's what I spend
Yeah.
most of my time doing is
Yeah.
feeling emotion and talking about those emotions. And I can't imagine not feeling safe to do that. It would eat me alive. And,
Mhm.
I know a lot of, men that is common that they just, to identify it and to be able to feel comfortable stating that is not
Yeah.
common. So, awesome
I
work.
find, yeah, I find with my little one, it's funny. I'm sure it's like a stalling tactic at bedtime, but it'll be like, okay, now everything lights out. We told our story. And then it's like, I'm going to tell you about my day. Like that's when he wants to talk about his day and his feelings. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to like cut you off.
We're
I'm going
here
to
for
let you
it.
talk about it. But it's like, that's when he wants to talk about it. It's not like, how was your day when you get home from school or car ride home? Like they won't tell you that much then. But I do feel like if there's like a little more relaxed time and then suddenly he'll start talking about it. I mean, I think that's with any child, not boy versus girl, but it's kind of sweet.
I love that. I've actually, my oldest started preschool just last month, and I've noticed the exact same thing. Once we get home, how was your day? What'd you do? Good, nothing, won't really say a
Yeah.
whole lot. And then I'm saying goodnight to her, and it's like, the floodgates open in the same thing. I'm like, I really want to know. So if you're delaying, it's working. And then, of course,
Yes.
and it's interesting because I've not actually heard another mom say that because, again, it's so new to me. But clearly, maybe it's a tactic, but maybe they are just relaxed and kind of settling in and ready to open up. let's keep talking about being a mom. Let's talk about, and you've already talked about it a little bit of that transition to being a stay-at-home mom. But I'd love
Mhm.
to dive into like how did the shift in how you saw yourself when you shifted to being a work-at-home mom, which you kind of started to talk about a little bit there, but how did that shift work for you both personally and professionally? Because obviously, you still have been with writing your
Yeah.
book and getting back into that. But I'd love to hear like what did that shift look like for you?
Yeah, and I feel like I have a few different perspectives because I was full-time in the workforce through my first two being born, and then I shifted out of the workforce a little bit after my second was born, and I took what I called like my radical sabbatical year. Like I knew that I wasn't going to be pursuing another job at that time. I was really going to focus on being home and then figuring out what I was going to do next because I actually left the company I'd been with 10 years and took a severance package. There was like a sweep of layoffs and a reorganization, and I had the opportunity to apply internally. And I was like, I just have this second baby and I know how fast they grow. I'm going to take that time and lean into motherhood. And then in exchange, signed a non compete. So I had a certain amount of time where I knew I couldn't go work in the same industry, which was actually good in the long run because it forced me to get more creative and more focused on what I really wanted next. And it kind of opened up more avenues to me. But that shift from going from like corporate full time to home full time for that year, like how you see yourself again, it's like the value. It's like I never appreciated how much patience and stamina and just all these different things that like a stay-at-home mom when you're caring for a child or children, multiple children. I had a baby and a 2-year-old at the time. Like it takes a lot of mental and physical energy, and I don't know that I was like aware of that as much. I don't know. So it made me appreciate stay-at-home parents so much more too, and like the value they bring. But at the time, like I said, I was like trying to prove myself in a way that like, okay, now I can show up really valuably as a mom full time because now I'm not bringing in the paycheck for this period of time. And then eventually I shifted back after about a year of focusing on that towards taking on my own consulting of marketing clients, and then now we're shifting into other business opportunities and publishing a book. So yeah, I had about a year where I was like just 100% like momming, I would say, and then another year after that of like shifting into my own business and writing my book, and now even more changes are coming ahead in our business ventures and things like that. But yeah, I just think it just changed the way I see the world and the way I see that both whether you're a full-time working parent or you're home, whatever it is, like whatever combination or 80/20, whatever, like it just showed me that all parents are working really hard, and that they're valuable no matter what they're doing, and that they all have struggles and ups and downs. There's the pros and cons of being home full time. There's the pros and cons of working full time. Whatever balance you do, it really made me appreciate everyone all around more for everything that parents do as parents and as working parents. So yeah, I saw myself differently, but I also saw the world differently.
I love that so much. And it's cool to hear that because you kind of had a little bit of all of it, right? You've done and still, discovering and having new chapters of that. But I, interviewed one of my closest friends that's a stay-at-home mom of four just a few days ago. And just, like you said, I've always respected stay-at-home moms tremendously because, and what I said to her, I don't think I could do it because exactly what you said, like I see on my weekends and, extra time that my girls are home, like you said, I think it's harder, period. Like for me, it is harder. And I think, like you said,
I think it
physically,
is.
like it's, when I'm working at home, I don't have an office I go to. It's like I can put in 120% the day. I could put in 20% that day. But guess what? That's on me. Obviously, I deal with the consequences. But when you have little ones, especially, I probably most ages, but the little, toddler, there's not a lot of 20% possible. Like there's physical
Yeah.
mental labor that's happening all day. And I think I get so much energy from what I do that I don't think my quality with my kids is as high when they're home all day because I'm so like I have these, I'm
Yeah.
like worried about the house. I'm cleaning up after that. These are things that I'm still working on, my
Yeah.
perfectionism, whatever you want to call it, that make me psychotic. It feels like at times that like when I work all day, I'm like, all right, ready to just like relax, hang out with them, be more present. And I used to be like, oh, I hate to say this out loud, but like like that's okay. And I'm realizing like I'm
Yeah,
not a bad parent that I like to work because I show up
no,
in a different way for my family. And it's so cool to hear that like you said, you see the world differently because I've talking to more and more women that it's like we always are afraid someone's going to judge us for how we feel, like what brings us fulfillment or what's best for our family unit. But that's
yeah.
actually like with a lot of women, that's not the case. There's
It's
not that
totally,
judgment.
yeah, it's totally personal. And I'm not saying like one way is better than the other. It's whatever balance is right for you. For me, going forward, well, I'm about to shift into having, pretty much a maternity leave here for the rest of the year pretty soon. But um, when I come back and I'm going to be working in the long term, I want to work some of the time, be with my kids quality time as well. Like both are a priority to me. But, if you're a woman that wants to be with the kids 100% of the time and that works for you, that's awesome. And if it's that you want or have to work all the time, that's awesome too. There's no right answer. But it just showed me that everybody's working really hard and both being at home with kids and being in the workforce, both are bringing value to your family. It's not like one or the other. And I really loved that it opened my eyes to that. There were some other, you mentioned like, I don't know if I could do it. I had people tell me that too. Like when I was leaving the workforce and they're like, oh, you're not going to like go get another job right away. And I was like, no, I'm going to take this time and kind of like soak it in and see what I want to do next anyway and spend that quality time. But you could, because I know I was one of those people too. Like you could if you wanted to, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
anything. It's like you don't start out day one on the job being the top performer. And that was kind of like what I learned, like, okay, I need to figure this out. Like, how do we do schedules and how do we,
Hmm.
do all these things? And like another thing as a stay-at-home parent during that phase was like, you don't think about the fact that you need breaks. So like my husband would get home sometimes and it would be like, okay, I've been parenting for like 10 hours or whatever. And most jobs, even if you're, my first job working in retail or something, you get a 15-minute break every so often.
Hmm.
There is no break when you're
Hmm.
parenting. So it'd
Hmm.
be like, I think I need 15 minutes to take a walk. Or like, I
I
would
need to take a
say that to
shower.
other women, like, don't feel bad saying that you need a break because you're still doing a full-time job. Like it is a job. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I literally have, I told you an earmark. And it's so funny because it's exactly what we're talking about in your book here. I was just going to read, in it was the transition from full-time work to full-time mothering was a transformation that pushed me to grow in many ways, but it also shed light on the fact that no mom is just a mom and that mothers who do not work formally outside the home at any given time are working just as hard inside their homes. They're all physically, mentally, emotionally to their family, their blood, sweat, and tears. My time as a full time mom ended up being just as valuable to our family as the years in which I had brought in six figures. That part was like so impactful. And I think you described exactly what you were just saying, like so perfectly in words and just like you are
Yeah.
now of like it is in and I think that's obviously the challenge, financially for some families, like it's just not an option. But the fact that you were able to say like this is as this in the blood, sweat, and tears is so accurate, but like this isn't I impacted my family in the same way. And how amazing to see that and to be able to identify that. I loved that and it was just kind of perfect timing. And
Yeah, absolutely.
how has that been then professionally of this like balance? It sounds like you've seen like what that, being at home and that identity and what that provides your family. But like you said, I know the next few months are going to be different with this little one coming any day. But how has that been, kind of in that transition, kind of a little bit towards like maybe going, like you said, kind of a little bit more towards professional again? What do you think, what do you think you've gained from like moving between those identities? But also like, what have those challenges been?
Yeah, well, I gained perspective definitely of understanding that everybody works and everybody works hard. And then I also gained, it just was like an accelerated growth period for me because I did have to face myself and my needs because to show up for my family physically and mentally, like I had to reevaluate myself. There were times when I was feeling so burnout, either just like physically, emotionally, mentally, where I had to get better systems in place. I had to start prioritizing my own care and my own needs so that I could show up better for them and for myself and just for the world. So for me, it brought me a lot of growth, a lot of healing, actually, even though it felt hard in the beginning, like, wow, this is way harder than I thought. I thought it'd just be, like, oh, it's pretty easy, sunshine, rainbows, do some coloring, do some snacks, but there's also a lot of hard moments throughout the day with a toddler and a baby and things like that. So it really can wear on you, like physically and emotionally. So just finding ways to care for myself. I got back into physical activity. I started prioritizing my sleep, journaling to just like reflect on my emotions and how I was processing things. And, all of that really helped me kind of balance out so that I could show up in a better way as well.
I love that. And I love that. I was going to ask that, but you went through a couple of them, what those things are for you, because I think, especially earlier you are into motherhood or probably any point in motherhood, if you haven't been prioritizing your self-care, I think it's hard to like, what do I even, it's, you almost like lose that part of your identity of like taking care of yourself. What do you enjoy when it's your time and about no one else? And you said a few of those things that you do. And I think that's just so important for every everybody, but especially moms, to have like a list. Even it's the suggestion my mom gave me of like have a list of those things that you
Yeah.
do, and she's a big journaler, and that's one of them. But that's it sounds like you've done your best to make sure you're taking care of yourself as you navigate
Yeah.
those
And
shifts.
I would also say this could be for stay-at-home moms or for like small business owners where maybe you're a little bit more out on an island than you used to be, or if you were ever in the big corporate world and you had like big teams. And that was a shift too. That's like you are a little bit more on your
Hmm.
own for most of the
Hmm.
day. And I think it's important to like get out in the world. So like I would take them out to do things or to find other mothers or other groups that you connect with. And then I just think as women and mothers in general, no matter what your level in the workforce or not, is making time to connect with other women. Like if that's you and your girlfriends getting together, I know it's not that easy with kids. Like we try to play, like my friends around here, it's like we try to plan, and if we get together once a month, like that's pretty good. But yeah, make sure you make that time for yourself to
Hmm.
kind of like refresh and just
Hmm.
like connect and laugh and do things that are joyful and fun too. So that's been helpful for me too.
Absolutely. Having a community and finding a community, maybe if you don't have that, like you said, especially if you become a stay-at-home mom, and I can completely relate. When I started my business, I went from this big team of, a team of leadership, a team that I worked with, collaborating and bouncing ideas off of. And that was one of the hardest transitions to owning my own business was like, who do I talk to? Like, there's no one
Yeah.
on my teams. Now I have, a couple of employees, but also I just reached out to people that were in, it took me
Yeah.
a little bit, but like people that were at the last company I was at, or people, similar situations that broke off and did their own thing. And like, 18 months in, I have these, people I meet with regularly that have become my own
Yes.
little, network and team. And it's just like you said, it's I think just so energizing, both as a
Yeah.
mom, any sort of play date, but also, to have that because I think especially post COVID, it's there's so many things that just didn't really go back to normal for a lot of people. And I think at least for me, I am an extrovert. I do get a lot of my energy from being around other people. And in, so much of a remote world anymore, there's a lot of positives, there's a lot of connection. I don't know if we'd be doing this if this remote
Yeah.
situation hadn't happened. But I think I think we underestimated how much we as humans need and crave and get out of community, and especially in person. That I love that you brought that up because I think it's undervalued, and especially has been something
Yeah.
that some people have lost, after the pandemic.
Yeah. And you need those connections. And I don't know. I feel like I'm both. Sometimes I'm introverted, sometimes I'm extroverted, but sometimes I lean towards like, okay, I'll just stay in, instead of putting myself out there. But I have found that by being pushing yourself a little bit more and putting myself out there and willing to make connections, whether that's in person or virtually, like that has brought a lot to my well-being too. And
Mhm.
it's funny with writing a book, a little bit over a year ago, I was like, I can't think of anyone that I know that's an author. Like, who can I ask
Mhm. Mhm.
to, talk about this process with? I knew like one person that I was way back in the past and like tried to reconnect with them. And I don't know if it was even the right email, like never heard back. But then I was like, okay, I'm just going to start figuring it out. And now, like this week, like having launched it and like all these other supporters that I have that are other authors or like just connecting with other authors, I'm like, that's such a huge shift in just a year that I didn't know anyone. And now I have like lots of people that I can call on that we talk to all the time.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
whatever you're passionate about or whatever you're working on, like there is a community out there. You just have to kind of be willing to put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And be vulnerable, which is scary. But I've not done that or heard anyone that's done it and regretted it. And, just like you said, there's other people, you're never alone. There's other people that are going through something similar. Sometimes you just got to find them and look for them, which again always pays off. Let's talk about a little bit of wins and struggles. I'd love to hear again with where you're at right now in your life. So we'll say today, what's
Mhm.
something you're really proud of?
I'm really proud of, well, a few things. I'm really proud that I did make the book happen, but while I started it when I wasn't pregnant with my third, and now I've like gone through an entire pregnancy pretty much to making it happen. And it's like, as women, I feel like we're just capable of so much. If it's something we're passionate about and it's like a true goal from our heart and soul, there's a way to make it happen. And I'm proud of myself for keeping going through through all the phases of, going through pregnancy and all of that. And I could have just said, it's I'm gonna give up that dream for now and put it on a shelf. But I kept going and I got it done, and now it's out in the world and I'm connecting with so many women over the stories, which was really why I did it, is if it can help any other women or if it can make them feel less alone, like the fact that I got through it and did it and that it's real in the world. I do feel proud of myself for getting it across the finish line.
As you should. And
Thank you.
I meant to mention, I think I've messaged you and emailed you, but congratulations, because that is to publish a book is huge anytime. But being what, I don't know how many weeks you were this week, but almost 9 months pregnant.
Yeah.
And into, with, I don't know about your brain, but when I was pregnant, my brain was not necessarily functioning in the way that it
Yeah.
should, is absolutely just incredible. And like you said, especially what you were so vulnerable in sharing in your stories that, I've already, and I messaged you this, like immediately I was like, oh my, like, yeah, yes thing as I go. And
Mhm.
it's just so many things that I think, again, so many women have. It sounds like, you've already shared conversations with, but will continue to be impacted by, and that's again amazing. So thank you for also powering through, because me and I know several others are going to have such a positive impact from that.
Thank you. And
Uh,
then the
yeah.
struggles,
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's do
I
the
can take that one too.
other side. Yeah, what
Yeah.
feels really hard right now in this stage of life, in anything, motherhood, or kind of where you're at professionally.
Yeah, for me, it's the balance of everything still and trying to be intentional about how do I make sure we're still having quality time and presence with our children and as a family while we're also working on business ventures and, promoting a book and trying to get the word out to people about that. And then I just want to make sure, that okay, did we overschedule the calendar or do we have enough downtime with the kids or the kids getting to have us when we're present and we're not just like focusing on the next thing, and then just the rhythms of a household. I'm always looking for
Mm.
better ideas to stay up with the laundry, so that one's always catching
Oh.
up to me. But yeah, it's just balancing all of it, right? The family
Mhm.
and business and passions, and just trying to find the right rhythms and balance. And I think I'm about to be going through another big transition of adding a third to our family, so I'm going to continue to navigate that probably
Mhm.
for years to come. So yeah, just that balance of trying to make the right amount of quality time while still pursuing, the passions and the financial aspects of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, is that relatable. First, the laundry. I say to my husband all the time, like, it's my absolute worst, the least favorite part of any day. And it just feels endless. Like you said, anyone, please, anyone comment, reach out to Lauren and I if you have the laundry hack, because I haven't found it. But really what you said about that balance is just so relatable, and in a perspective that I've talked about. One of my really good girlfriends is just remembering every time I'm on myself about that, it's like, this is a season. This is temporary. Like, if it feels like the balance is not in where, I want it to be, or where, I ideally it should be, or what I, in have foreseen, or what I'd like it to be, that like that's right now. And in a few months, it might feel like it's weighted the other way, and that's okay. Like those are seasons. So hopefully going into this next season that,
Yeah.
just like you mentioned earlier, I think that reminder of giving ourselves grace when we're navigating
Yes.
that, because this is the first time, right? It's always like, this is the first time I've dealt with this. I'm doing my best. And
Yeah.
I, something else again, I probably heard on a podcast that I can so relate to, and I try to remind myself of, and maybe this will be helpful, is I I've been trying to talk to myself the way that I would talk to a friend. So I think of those things where it's like, if I last night's a great example. I was actually doing, and I told you I'm recording this in a new way. So I spent most of the evening with the girls at the dinner table. I was sitting there with my laptop testing the recording, and it took way longer than I wanted it to. And it was almost the whole evening with them there. And by the time they went to bed, I was like, just so bummed. I wasted this evening
Yeah.
with the girls because I, had to do this. But I thought to myself, like, if one of my, girlfriends texted me and told me this, I wouldn't be like, wow, you're such a bad mom. Like, you
No.
didn't spend time with your kids. I'd be like,
No.
oh my gosh, like that's awesome. You figured it out. Like you'll have all weekend with them. So it's like, obviously I'm talking about conversations with yourself, but like I think we're so much harder on ourselves than we would
Yes.
ever be on other people. And the expectations we have for ourselves are so much more unrealistic than they would be for someone that you love and care about. And it's like, you're not even going to treat yourself with that same grace. So
Yeah.
I've tried to like think like, would I talk to one of my best friends the way that I'm making myself feel right now? And it's kind of a cool way to like almost force yourself like, oh, that's not okay.
No, absolutely. And it's like that's not your every night, right? That was once in a while. And I love that you use the word grace because I feel like that's such a huge thing. I've also been learning to give myself is grace, right? Like we do mess up or we do fall short and you're not going to be perfect. No one ever is. We can be improving and growing and, working towards who we want to become and what we want to do. But yeah, grace, we should give it to other people and we should give it to ourselves very, very much too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to do a few takeaways and wrap up here. This has been absolutely incredible. We've talked a lot about how all moms work, and we just talked about like what that balance looks like. But how does that feel, after you've been through these transitions and as you go towards, this new chapter with number three and these new business adventures? It sounds like, what would you say is like, what are your goals going into this? Or what would you say to a friend, even if we want to put it on, if either things you're telling yourself or what you'd say to someone else that's going to this next chapter? Like, what are your focuses, and how, you're going to balance and navigate, what's next for you?
Yeah, so as I move into my next chapter, I'm going to stay focused on, what aligns with my values and my priorities. I want to continue taking care of the health and well-being of myself and of my family so that I can show up really in a strong way for them and for the world and for all our business ventures in the future. And again, it's like back to that grace. It's like being willing to take the seasons and the shifts as they come. Things always come up. And, some weeks and months are going to be really big business months for you. And some weeks and months you're going to have sick kids. I had a son break an arm last year. Like you just have to be willing to go with the flow of it a bit and not be too hard on yourself and be willing to accept that who you were yesterday is not who you have to be tomorrow. If you had a bad day or things didn't go the way you liked, reflect on what's working and what's not, and being willing to kind of let go of what's not working to make room for what does. So, yeah, I'm just going to continue prioritizing that well being and that balance and, just staying aligned with myself as I go forward into all these big life changes.
Yeah, that's that's awesome. And then it reminds me of what you talked about, of releasing those expectations. And it's like the expectations of others or of yourself, and the pressure you put on, what that's going to look like. Like it's like rolling with the punches. It's like, I can think, it's going to look like this, but just accepting it for what it is, and in that grace, I think is really the only way, right? What would you say to women who feel stuck in a version of themselves that doesn't fit anymore?
Yeah, I can totally speak to that because I've been there and I've had times when I just felt kind of blah, like my energy was low, my physical health wasn't great, my mental health wasn't really doing that great either, like during some of those times of transition. And I would say to other women that just take one small step. You don't have to have it all figured out. It's not the all or nothing mindset. If you haven't been to the gym in years, just take a walk outside for 10 minutes. Work yourself up. Like once you're brave enough to go in the gym, spend 10 minutes on the treadmill and come back again the next day and the next day. It's
Mhm.
just it doesn't have to be these huge leaps. Like if you have somewhere where you want to be that you're not today, like what's the smallest step that you could do to just move 1 inch in that direction? The rest is going to fall into place as you go, is what I've learned. And just have, the faith that it will. And,
Mhm.
just be brave enough to take that one little step towards feeling better, whether that's your health or a dream you have or whatever it may be, or asking for help, whatever it is, just take that little step. You don't have to have the whole thing figured out to change.
Mhm.
You can make the smallest move and still it'll add up.
I love that. It's like you just need to take the first step. You don't have to climb the mountain today, right? Like you're working your way towards, the it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, like so many
Yeah.
of those sayings that like that's exactly, exactly what you're recommending and it's spot on. All right. In closing, if a listener takes one thing away from your story, what do you hope it is?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one thing that I would want to share with all the listeners, all the women out there, is that you are not alone. That's really the core thing that brings my whole book together. And I kind of summarize that in the end of my story, for those of you that get the chance to read it. But just through all the phases and things that I've been through as a woman, the ups and downs, there's times like in new motherhood or job loss or just other hard things that happen, and it's like you can feel like you're the only one. You get so turned in and you are so internally focused that you forget that there's so many other women that have been through what you're going through. There's so many other people that would be willing to support you. And um, you know as a part of my faith, I believe that there's even greater powers that support us and that
Mhm.
are well intentioned for us. So you're not alone, whatever you're going through. Please don't feel ashamed or secluded in a way that you can't reach out to someone else, because there are so many other women and people that are here to support you. You are not alone.
Thank you. That is absolutely beautiful, and I know so many people need to hear that, not just today, but regularly. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so, so much for being here and talking with me and again sharing this such an empowering story in your book. I'll make sure to link it in the show notes for anyone listening that wants to check out all of the girls I was before. Highly, highly recommend it. And I will also make sure all the links to Lauren's social media are in the show notes. You can follow her and her journey. She shares, a lot of these words of wisdom from her experience. She shares on social media. And again, Lauren, thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I know so many others will as well. So we will see you next time on Roots and Realities. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Emma. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
That was so fun. Let me stop my other recording here. There we go.